The history of this tabby dates back to the time when the Spaniards and the English were actively dividing the seaways of the world's oceans and the lands of America, without regard for either the native population or each other. One of the most famous navigators of that time, Francis Drake, returning on August 9, 1573 from his round-the-world voyage, entered the port of Plymouth with ships, holds of which were filled with Spanish silver. Not yet ashore, Drake had already been hailed as a national hero. The wealth and fame that Captain Francis Drake brought back from the voyage stirred the whole of England and, of course, it was English boys who fell under the influence of such romance, dreaming of heroic voyages, battles with sea monsters and the discovery of new English colonies. Thomas Cavendish was 13 years old when Captain Drake's fame made its waves in England. Who knew how he would have liked to stand on the bridge of his own ship, with his face exposed to the moist sea breeze, and watch the welcome of the flotilla ashore as it entered port? In 1585, Admiral Sir Richard Grenville, by order of Queen Elizabeth, was about to pay a visit to Virginia, the English colony. And Thomas Cavendish went with him. This visit could not be called friendly. They plundered everything in their path, and Cavendish showed himself in all his glory in this campaign. The demon Drake had a much more violent rival. In 1585, Admiral Sir Richard Grenville, by order of Queen Elizabeth, was about to pay a visit to Virginia, the English colony. And Thomas Cavendish went with him. This visit could not be called friendly. They plundered everything in their path, and Cavendish showed himself in all his glory in this campaign. The demon Drake had a much more violent rival. In addition to looted gold, silver, and precious stones, the holds of their ships also contained tobacco. In general, rum and tobacco were inseparable companions on such voyages, which sometimes turned into one protracted sting. Needless to say, Thomas Cavendish never gave up either. On this campaign, Thomas Cavendish, already a man of rank and authority, took charge of the tobacco and rum supplies. Cavendish spared no expense for the rum, pouring it over the tobacco leaves to keep them from drying out. And at his behest, the leaves were wrapped in sailcloth and tied tight with ropes. The result was a large quantity of densely pressed tobacco, lavishly flavored with rum. Of course, no one stood by and watched the changes that were taking place in the tobacco, and Thomas Cavendish regularly ran his hand through these supplies. And, of course, it was observed that this treatment of tobacco did him no good, and it soon became Captain Cavendish's signature recipe. As you may have realized by now, Cavendish is not a type of tobacco, but a process whereby tobacco undergoes double fermentation. The first fermentation takes place after the ripe tobacco leaves are removed from the plantation. Almost any kind of tobacco may be used for making Cavendish, Virginia, Burley or Kentucky, or a combination of these varieties. More often than not, the process of Cavendishization is accompanied by an abundance of sugar, and sugar or products containing it in large quantities can be added to the tobacco: rum, maple syrup, chocolate, honey, and more. After careful mixing, the tobacco is sent under the press, where it is kept for a long time and undergoes another stage of fermentation. The time the tobacco spends under the press can be accompanied by additional temperature treatment. The time the tobacco spends under the press can vary from a few hours to a few days or even weeks, and it all depends on the goals the makers of Cavendish have in mind. After pressing, the tobacco is cut and the pressed tobacco plates are kneaded. This process can make the naturally pungent flavor and aroma of some tobaccos significantly milder. Burley, for example, has a low natural sugar content in the leaves, and making Cavendish from it makes the taste of this tobacco much sweeter. At the same time, the introduced natural aromatic additives are firmly fixed in the tobacco leaves, which when smoked allows the tobacco to exude various flavors that are not peculiar to it in its usual form. The very framework of the Cavendish creation processes is very vague, and the presence of the word Cavendish on tobacco packaging can only tell us that the tobacco has undergone some processing other than primary tobacco fermentation, air curing, flue curing, etc. Closing parenthesis. After all, the pressing and aging of tobacco leaves itself is the process of creating Cavendish. Of course, in today's range of tobaccos, Cavendish is primarily associated with tobacco blends saturated with exotic flavors.